Hello, folks. Welcome back to Angel Desk. Hashtag Doomsday Coach. Hashtag Angel Desk. This is Wendy Taywater coming to you today, dressed brightly. Yes, I'm wearing a tiara and a matching necklace as a Valentine's present from my wonderful husband, Christopher. Um, and I also wanted to kind of bring some cheer today because we're going to be talking about a very difficult subject, and that is the subject of domestic violence. It is not an easy subject to talk about. I have promised you guys that I would bring forth this video. I usually try to keep the videos under 20 minutes, but this one might actually go to 30. So please make yourselves comfortable. And I hope that the information that you have within will be helpful. I want to start off today by telling you a story of a woman I know. Before we go there, let's talk about what is domestic violence. A lot of people think that domestic violence is just about hitting each other or yelling at each other, but it can be as subtle as intimidating looks. There is a cycle of abuse I will try to link in to this video, but there are many types of domestic violence. You have emotional abuse, intimidation, minimizing, denying, blaming, using children as a pawn in a game of divorce, economic abuse, male privilege, coercion, and threats. And what we're talking about here is an absolutely unequal relationship. One partner feels entitled to receive exactly what they want, or they throw a fit, whether they use violent words by calling you horrible things like a bitch or worthless or anything like that. It's also about intimate partner violence. So I don't want to just keep this about women. It's also about men in domestic violence situations. Domestic violence for men has a tendency to manifest itself in verbal abuse. It's the wife who just can't seem to find anything good about the man that she's married, or a same-sex partner doing the same to their domestic mate. Emotional abuse is putting each other down, making you feel bad about yourself, or making the other person feel bad about themselves. Either they're complaining about their weight or their looks or something along those lines, or housekeeping. Any of those things can be considered domestic violence. And people will say, oh yeah, well, that's just an argument. There is a way to argue in a positive way rather than a negative way that breaks a person's spirit. We're talking about language and behavior that breaks a person's spirit. If you are starting to feel depressed, if you're starting to feel like you can't come home because you're afraid that you're walking on eggshells, if you have a partner that kind of looks at you with a side glance when you do something that's not quite right, not just a look, but a look of hatred or rage, that is intimidation, and that is the beginning of the cycle of violence. The cycle of domestic violence is usually it could be a long-term thing or it could be a short-term thing, but usually the partner the partner that you're with usually starts out as being a very positive, upbeat person. They seem to be the person of your dreams. They're so excited to be with you. You're the best thing coming. And then on top of that, they may quickly commit to the relationship. They may say, I love you within just a couple of days or couple of weeks. They may propose marriage in just a few short months. That's usually a sign that someone is insecure and they're seeking a person to make them feel whole, that they are not fully feeling whole within themselves. So the relationship starts out beautiful, wonderful. It's the best thing you've ever seen. It's the best person you've ever met. And then the complaints start. You want to go to a movie, and they make some side comment about why they don't want to go to a movie. And this continues each time you make a suggestion. They don't want to do it. They criticize the fact that you want to do something. And then over time, especially with intensive economic or social conditions, that behavior begins to escalate. So now they're using curse words when they talk to you. Maybe they're breaking something in the house. Maybe they're breaking their own things and then they move to breaking your things. Maybe they're hitting the dog. Maybe they're yelling at the children. All those within themselves may not say domestic violence, but it's a repeated pattern of that same behavior that is triggered by a discontent or a disrespect of the other person. So either they're not happy with you or they're not happy with their circumstances, but they're being very verbal and very direct about how they are not happy. And then it starts to turn to, it's your fault. There's a lot of blaming. The bills didn't get paid this month, so it's your fault because you're spending too much time with the kids, but you're not spending time working. Things like that don't make sense. If it doesn't set right in your spirit, it probably isn't right. When we talk about economic abuse, these could be situations that, in their most extreme state, you are cut off from money, from having any sort of means of income. It starts off as, hey, yeah, stay home with the kids. I'll take care of everything too. Why do you want to go to the doctor? That doesn't even make sense. It's too expensive. You can't go. You don't make the money around here. And it starts to escalate and get bigger and bigger and bigger until you feel like you have no way out. You have no means to support yourself. You've been isolated from family and friends. You might be embarrassed. If you think that this lifestyle is only for those who are poverty stricken, you're very wrong. Often happens in households where there's wealth because there's a power structure there related to the money. And you have to be careful when you compromise your values to get involved in a situation that may just be providing economic or social comfort for you. If you do that, then you're putting yourself in a position where you could potentially become victimized because of your vulnerability. So it's all about a power structure. One person has power, the other one doesn't have as much power. Or one person keeps taking power and the other person keeps giving up their power until there's this completely unequal equation to where one person can't speak of their needs, but the other one always speaks of their needs and demands that their needs be met. So those are just some of the simple explanations of domestic violence. So I'm going to talk with you about how this can manifest itself in an individual. And let's talk about a young lady. Let's call her Lisa. Okay. So Lisa was born in a family of violence. The origins of Lisa's birth are controversial. It is said that her father possibly raped her mother, but then her mother was also mentally ill. So there is some question about the validity of the statements against Lisa's mother. So Lisa's mother ends up becoming pregnant by her significant other, goes to the grandmother and says, hey, I don't want to have this child. I'm not happy in my relationship. I don't want to see this happen. I don't want to bring this child's life into the world. And that's Lisa, who is in the womb of her mother. And Lisa's mother is saying, I don't want this child. Get rid of this child. However, the grandmother says, no, this is the child that you've wanted. This child will be a blessing to you. So Lisa is born into a family of violence. There is a lot of anger. There's a lot of physical abuse, much more verbal abuse. And this is how she grows up. When Lisa is 3 years old, her first memory is of being sexually abused by a friend of the family who was staying there temporarily because they needed a place to stay. Lisa reported the incident to her mother, and then her mother made sure quickly that the perpetrator against Lisa was removed from the home. However, with the economic pressure that Lisa's mother was under, Lisa's mother suffered a great deal from mental health issues. She had some paranoia, she had some depression, but she also had bouts that seemed like they were bipolar, like she'd be very happy one minute, very sad the next. So Lisa's mother would be a doting mother one minute and then an extremely critical, physically abusive mother. The abuse started when Lisa was 8 years old. And the reason the abuse started was because the mother was so angry with the father. And Lisa looked so much like her father that Lisa's mother, started hitting on Lisa, started leaving bruises on Lisa. But Lisa's mother was well known in the community, had a good job, well known by family members. So on the surface, it looked like Lisa's mom was just a gentle, quiet, sweet woman. However, Lisa suffered this abuse from the age of 8 till the time she was 14 years old. At that point, Lisa said to her mother, "You touch me again and I will kill you." Lisa had grown larger than her mom. Her mom was rather petite. At that point, her mom stopped physically abusing her. Also during that time, because of the tumultuous family, Lisa did have other siblings and family members who came to stay, and there was a constant rotation of people in and out of the house. So Lisa was abused again, but this time for a longer term by a very close relative from age 8 to age 11. During that time, Lisa felt terrible about herself. She gained a lot of weight. She stopped taking care of herself physically. And then the teachers were concerned with what was going on with Lisa. So they started to send a private investigator, a DFACS, Department of Family and Children's Services investigator, to Lisa's home to try to figure out what was going on with Lisa. It turns out that Lisa was being physically abused by her mother and was being sexually abused by close relatives. However, Lisa didn't talk about the sexual abuse until she was almost 11 years old. And the only reason that Lisa reports that she spoke about that abuse was because it was a very close relative and she was raped. So she was molested by 3 relatives, raped by 1. So Lisa had extreme issues with self-esteem. She had extreme issues with self-worth, and she didn't know how to function in the world as a normal teenager. So all her friends were running around, having slumber parties and fun things like that, and Lisa lived constantly in a state of fear. It wasn't until Lisa went to the church and spoke with a lady named Mrs. Ronalder, who actually took an active interest. She was Lisa's Sunday school teacher. And Lisa expressed the abuse that she was experiencing, and Mrs. Ronalder was aghast at what Lisa had gone through because, according to everyone around, Lisa was a very happy child, very easy to get along with. Lisa made excellent grades. But what they didn't understand is that Lisa found her worth in achievement. So her world outside of the house was welcoming and inviting. And Lisa always feared going back home because she didn't know what was going to happen next. It wasn't until 11 years old that Lisa told her mother. And Lisa's mother's response was, "Well, what do you want me to do about it now?" Lisa was devastated. She had learned in school that when you have been a victim of abuse, you tell your family, you tell a trusted adult so that you can get help. Needless to say, Lisa did not receive the help that she needed. Mrs. Ronalder was still in the background, still doing what she could do to help Lisa. So she used to tell Lisa that she was pretty and that she was smart. And she kept building up Lisa to where Lisa thought, maybe I can have a different life than what I have now. When Lisa had revealed the sexual abuse to her mother, and her mother responded in that way, Lisa became extremely depressed. Lisa attempted to take her life when she was 11 years old because she felt like there was no way out. There's no way to get through this. So Lisa was then hospitalized, and that saved Lisa's life because she was exposed to a different world. She was taught that being sexually abused, being physically abused was not normal. It's not the way that most kids live. And Lisa, at the first, was very ashamed and embarrassed that she had been through such a traumatic experience. But she found a great deal of comfort in her Christianity, because that is what Mrs. Rinaldo taught. She taught Lisa that although your Father in heaven may be absent and your relatives on earth may not stand by your side, God the Father in heaven will always be by your side. And when you need him, all you have to do is pray. So Lisa started when she was 12 years old, sleeping with a Bible underneath her pillow, because she thought that, okay, if I have the Bible, then I have protection. And Lisa prayed every day. The abuse didn't stop right away, but it did stop after Lisa was hospitalized, because when Lisa was hospitalized, she was taught about self-esteem, self-worth, and what's called assertiveness training, to where you can say no. But that wasn't the end of Lisa's problem. Lisa grew up very quickly. Her body matured before her age. She was fully woman at age 11, and as a result had a lot of male suitors. The male suitors were primarily interested in Lisa's physical appearance, but she didn't understand that because she did not think she was attractive. She had heard all her life from her mother that pretty is as pretty does, and her mother never once said, "You are beautiful." Her father never told her she was beautiful. So she did not know that she was beautiful. And in these relationships with these young men, Lisa found comfort in that she was beautiful. But what did they want in return? They wanted sex. And that's the way it went for Lisa for 4 more years, until she put a stop to it and she said, "No more. I do not want this anymore." Lisa then changed to a different kind of person. She became a more abusive person herself. So this is common with those who have been victims of abuse and they're trying to get out of that situation. They have a tendency to turn in the opposite direction and become abusers themselves. So Lisa felt like her way of taking control of her life was to take control of the people around her. When Lisa was 15 years old, she met a very nice young man, very sweet, very innocent to Lisa. She had never met anybody like that before. And this young man took an interest and treated her like a lady. He picked up her books and walked her home from school and made sure that she got on the bus okay if she was going to ride the bus. He was there every morning to walk her to school and made sure that she got on the bus safely every afternoon, and then he would go about his way. And when the young man told Lisa that he loved her, Lisa didn't understand what that was. That couldn't be possible. You cannot be this innocent and have this level of love for a person. So that's what, people who have been abused, they don't believe in love. They don't believe in beauty and acceptance for who you are as an individual. They are so consumed with how they're feeling inside that they cannot recognize what is healthy and what is not healthy. It's kind of an illusion in their mind. So Lisa did some pretty terrible things, trying to dominate that individual, but he stuck by her until Lisa broke up several years ago. When Lisa decided she wanted to get out of this town, she had to get out of this town. There was no way that she was going to stay in the house with the abusers that she grew up with. Lisa wanted to run away. That's what Lisa knew how to do, was to run away. So Lisa runs away to college. She gets a great education. She does everything right. She gets married early, and guess what? She ended up marrying an alcoholic. Now, what is it about Lisa that she attracted that into her life? And it's because it was a comfort that she was used to. Lisa got out of that marriage, and then what did she do? She went right back into the cycle again with someone who seemed to be very much like her mom. Um, very supportive one minute, very abusive the next minute. Again, why did Lisa go into this situation? It's what she was used to. And it wasn't until Lisa spent some time in therapy um, outside of high school that she started to understand what her worth was. And she tried to understand how this cycle of abuse could be broken generationally. So the first thing she did was she went to what she was used to. She went back to prayer. She went to church. So what happened there? She obtained a support network outside of her abusive environment. So she went into a situation where she could get positive feedback, talk about her issues, listen to other people who had been through those problems, and listen to those people and how they resolved their problems along with an expert. So there was group therapy, support groups through the church, and there were also individual therapy support groups through the church. So if you find yourself that you're in a very difficult domestic violence situation, you're probably there because you're kind of used to being treated that way. But I'm telling you, my husband gave me a tiara for Valentine's Day, and it reminded me that I am a queen. I am a queen in my own right. Women and men have an amazing connection to the earth, to God, that has to be nurtured. And when we step away from that and we allow ourselves to be abusive or to be abused, we are desecrating God's nature. So I do have a confession to make right now, and that is, hello, my name is Wendy Taywater, aka I am Lisa. That was my story. That's how I grew up. So I spend my life right now trying to help you all get out of those situations so that you don't have to go through those situations of domestic violence. You have to want to get out of that situation more than you want to breathe, because the abuser will always be there, whether it's in your family or it's somewhere else outside, excuse me, outside of your family. Abusers exist, and they exist to suck the life out of another human being because they are missing parts of themselves. They are incomplete human beings and they need help. So stop the pattern now. Call someone now. If you're in a domestic violence situation, there's a number, a national hotline. Go to either thehotline.org or dial 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233. The pandemic has resulted in many of you going through these exact same situations. Women, children, intimate partners. In Latin America alone, during the pandemic, the abuse rate, the domestic violence rate went up 94%. 94%. In the United States, the domestic violence rate went up by 22%. And in Lebanon, the rate went up by 54%. You are not alone, and you don't have to stay here. But let me tell you, the story ends on a good note. Once you know your worth, you understand that there is a life outside of domestic violence. And I'm a witness to tell you right now, remember that young man who carried my books when I was 15 years old? He's now my husband. After all these years, I finally married the man that loved me the entire time, that showed me that love is possible. You can have a functional, happy relationship. And I am the most joyful I have ever been, and I cannot explain how my life has been blessed. So I encourage you, get out of that situation immediately. 1-800-799-SAFE. 1-800-799-7233. Thehotline.org if you can't get to a phone, and get the help that you need. And if you need some more help beyond that, go to My Doomsday Coach Facebook page and send me a private message. I personally will respond to you and help you through that situation. Have a blessed day. Be the light and spread the light. Angel Desk, Doomsday Coach, signing off.